Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the second annual Wild Wisconsin Winter Web Conference. Whether you're just joining in or have listened previously, we're glad you're joining us. I'm Jamie Machek with the Nicolay Federated Library System in Green Bay, Wisconsin. So Nicolay, along with 13 other library systems in Wisconsin, are bringing you this conference virtually, and we hope you are enjoying it. I know I am. I'm hearing a lot of good things. We're being asked if we'll continue this again next year, and as long as I am still employed and still alive and still get the support to do it, I don't see why not. So I think we would do it again. It's been very successful for us. So our next presentation is with CJ Lynce, and CJ is the manager of Tech Central at the Cleveland Public Library. Oh, and my supervisor said sounds like a plan, so awesome. So it will happen. And he's going to be talking about incorporating creative spaces on any budget, and they just opened a makerspace in their library this week, so that's pretty exciting. So CJ, whenever you're ready, go right ahead.
Okay, well, thank you for having me out today to talk about incorporating maker spaces or creative spaces into your library. And no matter what budget you have, big, small, large library, if you have any space or no space. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about what are creative spaces, also called maker spaces. What are some of the services and programs and equipment and tools that are found in these, and how can libraries incorporate some of these services and tools and equipment into your library? We're going to be talking about some things that are completely free. We're going to be talking about some things that just require a little bit of investment. We're going to be talking about some things that are larger investments, some bigger pieces of equipment. So I first want to start out just by giving a couple examples of some maker spaces throughout the country. So this picture is from a makerspace in the Westport Public Library in Connecticut, and they set up a makerspace smack dab in the middle of their library. They removed some stacks and actually built out these 4 temporary walls, and inside of it houses a few different things. So they have a 3D printer that you can print with. They do balsa wood creation. I think they've done some things with creating airplanes. And the neat thing about this is that they have a maker in residence. So this is somebody from the community that comes in, and it will change from time to time, that is there to share their expertise with whoever comes in and uses the space. A lot of times the maker in residence is working on a project throughout the day. You can come in and help this person. You can learn about the process of whatever they're making at that particular point in time. So it's a neat way of just smack dab in the middle of your library, put up 4 walls, bring an expert for the community in, and create yourself a makerspace. So these are a couple pictures from the Detroit Public Library. Inside the Detroit Public Library, their central library, they have a Hype Team space, and inside of that they have something called the Hype Makerspace. The interesting thing about this is not really any dedicated space that they call their makerspace. This is one half of their teen room. You can see their teen room in the upper left-hand picture. They have their books, they have their tables, they have their reference desk, and then they have a couple tables and a stage that they just have out in the middle of their teen space. The room that you see on the bottom right is their storage room for their equipment, their computers, their tools. They put all this stuff in the storage room and they bring it out depending on the project that they're doing. You see there's a 3D printer tucked away in the upper picture that they basically bring it out, put it on the table, and let the teens go at it. Depending on what they're doing that day or that week, they swap out the equipment, put it in the back room, and so their space is very, very flexible. They do have a stage that stays out the entire time that kids can use, cameras and things like that. One of the question that came up is at the Westport, is the maker in residence paid or a volunteer to be there? I've heard of different cases. There's some libraries that they've gotten a grant to pay their maker in residence. Some libraries, it's a volunteer. It's somebody who may have a day job and they come in the evening, or vice versa, and they volunteer to be there. It really depends on your community and what the connections that you have. If you can get grant funding for a maker in residence, that's great. If you get volunteers, we actually look for people in our community that are experts in their field that can come in and do maybe simple programs for us, maybe an hour or 2 hour long programs. We've had a lot of interest in being able to start that up. We haven't done our first one yet, but we have a lot of our experts in our community that they want to come in and share and give back to the community as part of this. So here's another example. The Indianapolis Central Library, their downtown library, has a department for youth and teens called the Learning Curve. This is not a traditional makerspace. This takes up, I think it's their entire second floor of their the Central Library downtown. And they have teen spaces like the think tank where people can meet, draw on the walls. They have very flexible tables that you just come in. If you have a laptop, they actually have a bunch of laptops that they pull out and let the kids take to tables, or sometimes they'll chain them down to the tables in the afternoon and do various things. They've done robotics. They have Legos. You see the picture that says the arena down here. It has a little, it has a netbook on display, but they have a bunch of these. These things actually sit on the floor. And they have Lego designs that they've built in the Learning Curve that they display in the floor. It's really neat. If you're going to PLA this year, stop by the Central Library and check out the Learning Curve. And they also have a media workshop, Adobe software, video editing software, basically media computers that are just loaded up with software. They have some equipment that teens and kids can use. This whole space is targeted for under 18, so it's a great creative and maker space that is targeted for youth and teens. And this is pictures of our Tech Central Makerspace. We actually just opened this past Saturday. In our space, we have a variety of different things. We have 4 computers that have Adobe products on there. They have some free and open source software on there. We have musical instruments available for people to plug into the computers and record. We have a couple Macs, so we have GarageBand that was pre-installed on them. They plug in the guitar to the computer, and they can record guitar or bass tracks or even keyboard tracks onto GarageBand. We have a camera and a green screen, and this we'll talk more about photography and green screens later and how you can do this, but allows you to take pictures in front of it and actually subtract out the green screen and put whoever you just took a picture of in Paris or France or who knows where. And we have some fabrication equipment like 3D printers and vinyl cutters. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But the great thing about this is you might see this space and say, hey, they put in a ton of money on here. You'd be surprised on how little we actually spent in this space. I told my boss, who's the director of public service, and he was floored that, like, I could have sworn you spent more on this. So we were able to do it for a relatively inexpensive amount. So this is a list of the couple places. I want to talk about one more place that I was actually just learning about today. It's in the Madison Public Library. It's called the Bubbler. If part of it, the Bubbler room is kind of a creative and maker space. They do a lot with programming, and I think they opened just a room. I've been learning a little bit more about it today. I'm trying to find more about it, but it's a great example of a creative or maker space in Wisconsin. So let's talk about what is a makerspace, or what is a creative space. I'm going to take a term from makerspace.com, and this is a definition of what a makerspace is. It really exemplifies the key points of a makerspace. So a makerspace serves as a gathering point for tools, projects, mentors, and expertise. A collection of tools does not define a makerspace, but rather we define it by what it enables, making. And a makerspace is a learning environment rich with possibilities. These are the key things to what a maker or creative space is going to be. It is a learning environment. It's an environment where we can get students and experts together and have this transfer of knowledge. It's a gathering point for people to come in and collaborate, learn, create, and make. So you don't have to have a space. It's really a collection of programs and services and tools that you can offer at your library to inspire people to come in and create and make. So some ways that you can make in your library. One of the first ways is programming, and I'm not talking about computer programming, I'm talking about library programming. Library programs that you can offer that, honestly, most of them can be very, very inexpensive or free. Patrons can come in and get hands-on with creating things. This could be creating things using software, creating things using their hands, with materials. There's a variety of things we'll talk about. Software. So one thing that all of our libraries have are computers. Computer access is very important in libraries in today's day. Most of our libraries have a standard set of computers. Computers usually have some sort of office suite. They have internet access. You might have things to help with resume or job searching, typing, or computer skills enhancement. You can also get software out there that's free or open source that you can put in to allow creation of audio, video, photography, a variety of things. Now, if your library IT department cringes at the sound of open source, I was an IT administrator and cringed on many occasions at the term open source. There are some very reputable pieces of software that are inexpensive or free and open source that you can install on a computer that aren't going to mess up your system, that will work with your standard library security and your standard library setup. You can get building sets. A lot of times these are toys like Legos or Connects or Erector sets. You can put those out there for your patrons to try. Let them get hands-on. Let them drop in and build stuff from scratch. It may not be any dedicated program, but just a chance for them to come in and get the gears rolling in their heads about how do I build. This can be for young and old. This can be for kids and adults, and I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. You can have tools and equipment. This is what a lot of people traditionally associate with a makerspace. You have tools like 3D printers and laser engravers and hand tools like hammers and nails and tape measures. But you don't necessarily have to do that. You can. Some of these tools are very expensive. Some of these tools are pretty inexpensive. And then physical spaces. I mentioned before that a makerspace or a creative space isn't necessarily about having an actual space. The Hype Teen Center in Detroit, they don't have a dedicated space. They have a closet in the back that they store some stuff in. They pull it out and use it as needed. Prior to Saturday, we didn't have a formal makerspace. Our entire computer area we had tables for people to sit at to use laptops. We commandeered them and used them for our programming. So we didn't have a dedicated makerspace. If you have room in your library, great. If not, you can do a lot of this stuff without having, you could do it in your meeting room perhaps. So let's talk about programming. Some ideas for programming that you can use that are pretty cheap or pretty inexpensive. We started about a year or actually last January 2013, our library started doing these hands-on programs called Maker Labs. And the whole point of these, we offer a slew of computer classes, typically 60 to 70 a month throughout the system. We didn't want to bring patrons in and teach them how to use a particular application or how to your standard computer stuff. We wanted to bring people in and show them how to do a task, how to create something. So these Maker Labs are hour-long, they're hands-on. They can use software, they might not use software. In the case of this one, we offered a Maker Lab called Making a Camera Obscura. And if you're not familiar with what a camera obscura is, it's a pinhole camera. And it was used in the, I believe it was the 17th century to basically duplicate drawings. So they would point the camera obscura at what they wanted to duplicate. They would put a piece of vellum or tracing paper or cloth over the back, and the pinhole would allow light to pass through, and you could trace over top of this cloth or this tracing paper or this vellum to create a duplicate of whatever you were looking at. We took this the lab. We explained what a camera obscura was. We gave them a little history lesson, and then we had them make it. And we made it out of cardboard and duct tape and packing tape. We had all this stuff lying around in our back office. Honestly, we had so much cardboard that I think our property management was kind of getting a little frustrated that we keep asking them to take the cardboard because we got it in with shipments and things like that. So we used it for our own good, and a little bit of duct tape and a little bit of packing tape, and we made a camera obscura in about an hour. Let's see. Oh, there it comes. We did another Maker Lab called Papercraft 3D Modeling. So my library has a couple 3D printers that patrons can have things printed on. We wanted to take a step back, and we realized that not everybody is going to be able to come to the library or use the 3D printer. So we wanted to take a step back and do something kind of old school with Papercraft. So we used a free app, which I'm going to be talking about. It's called 123D Make. It's a free app, or a free 3D app on the web that you can import or draw a 3D model. And what it will do is we'll take that 3D model and slice it up into layers. It's going to print those layers on a piece of paper, and then you use those outlines to cut cardboard out. You take the cardboard, you stack it one on one with each other, some double stick tape or some glue, and you created yourself a Papercraft 3D model out of paper and cardboard. We got a dozen scissors, we got a few glue sticks, and I think we printed about 200 sheets of paper with all the outlines. And patrons went to town. They cut them out. They created stuff. They had a blast. They were 3D models that they were creating just using their hands. So if you're looking for program ideas, this is a great website. It's specifically designed for libraries, and this came out of the iLead USA project. I believe it was the Illinois iLead USA project. It's called Make It at Your Library. If you're familiar with a website called Instructables, Instructables is it's a haven for makers and creative types that there's instructions on how to create everything. So instead of going to the store and buying something pre-made, you go to the store and you buy stuff to make something, or you look through your attic or your basement and you just pull stuff together and you create stuff. And there's tons of instructions on Instructables to do this. Make It at Your Library is really a kind of a platform on top of Instructables that's curated. So anybody can post on Instructables. Make It at Your Library are kind of hand-picked things from Instructables that could be appropriate for a library. Some of it's more appropriate for a makerspace. Some of the stuff is appropriate for any library, even if you don't have a creative or a makerspace. If you have a pair of scissors and a glue stick, a lot of these programs will be for you. You actually see that at one point in time, and I think they still do this, they divide it by if it's something that's going to make a lot of mess, or if you need tools, or if it's something that you cut out a piece of paper, or you might have the materials lying around. It's a great resource. Take a look at it if you get a chance. It's called makeitatyourlibrary.com. So this is an idea. I was inspired about this idea. I have no idea where this came from, but and it's kind of this whole idea of finding stuff in your basement. So I have these lights at home that we use. They're push lights, and they have a little sticker on the back. You can stick them underneath your sink or over top, or stick them over top of your sink or your stove, and you push them, and they're battery operated. And I'm thinking, what if you got magnets? You can get magnets for Amazon for a couple of bucks. You stick it on the back of that, and I have a magnetic whiteboard in my office. You stick them on the magnetic whiteboard, you power them up, you turn the lights off, and you have maker constellations. So I have not done this. The batteries are dead in my lights, so I haven't done this yet. But I think this is a great idea. Just find stuff in your house to do this. Bring it in the library and have a fun program. Really, you got to think out of the box. You got to be creative. Instructables will help you be creative. I browse that. I get yelled at sometimes in the evening because I spend an hour on Instructables just looking at stuff. Most of the stuff I'm not going to do, but you might find something just off the wall that you can do with your patrons at your library. So let's talk about some free and cheap software that you can install on your computer. Some of the stuff you might already have on your computer. If I mentioned it here, I've vetted it probably for the past 5 or 6 years, or even longer in some cases. It is being really good, inexpensive, free, or open source software that's not going to load your computer up with viruses or anything like that. So chances are most of your library computers, if you're running Windows, you have Windows Movie Maker already installed on your computer. If you have Windows XP, Vista, Windows 7, or even Windows 8, you can get Windows Movie Maker. It either comes preloaded or it's a free download from Microsoft. Load up some videos. You can do recordings of sound. You have a microphone on your computer. And just slice up some videos and make music videos. You can go combine it with a program like Audacity. It's a free open source audio editor. I know I have recorded stuff on my iPhone. I have imported it into Audacity, and I've chopped it up, combined it with some videos in Windows Movie Maker, and made a video. They're really easy to use, they're freely available, and they're going to run on just about any computer you can think of. Paint.net is a great graphics editing program. I've been using this for years. If you ever use Windows Paint, it's great for doing small drawings. It's not very powerful, and anything beyond the most basic thing, it's really hard to do on Paint.net. But honestly, I couldn't afford Photoshop. I know how to use Photoshop, but it's a pretty expensive product even for a library to afford. So Paint.net is like this perfect sweet spot of in between Paint and Photoshop. It allows you to do layers, you can do multiple colors, you can do filters, graphics effects. We'll be talking about a way I use it with green screen here in a few minutes. It's a great freely available. It's not open source, but it is free for just about any use to download. You can do graphics editing and provide that for your patrons. These are those apps I was talking to you about before. 123D Apps is actually a collection of apps from a company called Autodesk. They make AutoCAD, which is one of the most widely known CAD programs and also very expensive. They have in turn created these 123D apps for free. So 123D Make is the 3D to 2D slicer I was talking about for papercraft models. Tinkercad, we'll talk about, is a great online, freely available free CAD program. You have 123D Sculpt is available, I believe, for the iPad, and it gives you a virtual ball of clay that you can sculpt, you can indent, you can pull out, basically like working with a ball of clay on an iPad if you have those around. 123D Catch, you can take a bunch of pictures from all angles around something. 123D Catch will stitch them all together and create a 3D model out of a bunch of pictures. Really neat. I have no clue how it works, but it actually is pretty good. I forgot to mention, one of the places that I find a lot of my free software or ideas is a blog called Lifehacker. If you're familiar with Lifehacker, they have a couple of kind of running themes that you see appear usually about every week or every couple of months or so. Something called the Lifehacker High Five is actually, I believe, a weekly or every other week thing that they run. They do a call for programs, and they say, hey, everybody submit the best programs for doing this. And people will submit them, they'll review them, and they will throw back the 5 best programs at doing just about everything. Some things you can use for library, some things are kind of off the wall on how is this going to work. But it's a great way of just getting inspired and finding free or inexpensive programs. The majority of the High Five stuff is free or inexpensive because the readership doesn't want to pay $100 for a piece of software. Likewise, the Lifehacker Pack, something that comes around usually, I think they update it yearly or twice a year, and it's the best collection of, or a collection of the best apps that Lifehacker editors and readers have submitted. Most of them, again, are free or inexpensive. There are a ton of technology blogs, Lifehacker, Engadget, Gizmodo. I read those all the time and get ideas for projects or pieces of software, or even equipment, to incorporate into our makerspace. So here's an example of incorporating a piece of free software into programming. Microsoft released this program called the Image Composite Editor. We call it ICE, that will allow you to take either still pictures or panning videos of any scene. And if you take still pictures, you take a bunch of still pictures. You might have even tried to do this yourself. I think iPhones can't even do it automatically anymore. You take a bunch of still pictures, you run it through this program called ICE, and it will give you spanning or kind of beautiful panoramic images. This was actually taken off the top of our library. We are blessed with a wonderful skyline view from our 10th floor of our library of Cleveland. And this was actually using a panning video. So somebody stood up there with a video camera and just panned from left to right. We brought it through this program and created this wonderful panoramic. I couldn't believe the looks on people's faces when they took their panning videos that they created, run them through there, and just got gorgeous professional quality panoramic images out of this thing. And it was freely available. We loaded this up on a set of laptops, and it just worked for our program. Okay. Now let's talk about programming. So this is computer programming. We did a program called Making Code, Learn the Program, and we used an application called Kids Ruby. And this Kids Ruby was some off-the-wall program that we had found. I think it was off of one of the tech blogs. And it's aimed to do Ruby programming language for kids. Something very, very simple. You can, just a few lines will make it draw or make it do certain actions. We took this program and we actually made a program aimed at adults. So we took this Kids Ruby. What we found is the adults actually had a great time. They had so much fun with this Kids Ruby. Even the staff member who put this program together had no idea how to computer program before she started this. She learned how to do this just by using some of those tutorials that were in this program and a couple other free tutorials about Ruby programming online. We put this free application on those laptops again and put it out there, and the adults just had a blast doing it. We subsequently converted it to a kids programming maker lab, and they have just as much fun doing the kids Ruby programming class. So another idea of a way you can connect with your community is doing something like an open fair, or you've probably heard of a maker fair. The great thing about the maker and creative culture is people are by their nature creative, and we have such a great collection of creative people in all of our neighborhoods. It doesn't matter where you live. So the library actually went out. We didn't have a maker fair. Our next closest maker fair was, I believe, in Detroit. And we said we need to do something for the makers in our community. So we pulled together and we did the first annual Cleveland Mini Maker Fair. Besides a little bit of staff time, we used the library, so there was no additional cost on that. We had some staff time, and we partnered with a couple organizations that were glad to donate their time and their expertise and even some equipment to put this on. The great thing about this is we did not have to try at all to get people to come to this to present. Within just a matter of a couple weeks, for our first call for makers, we had 50 people that wanted. Some of them were companies that made 3D printers or that made certain things. Some of them were just hobbyists. Some of them were organizations that did or existing maker spaces in our community. They were itching for some forum to come out to and present their wares, what they've been making. So if you don't, and you can, it doesn't matter if you have a mini maker fair in maybe the big city and then one of your, a small suburb wants to do a maker fair. Cleveland did a maker fair, Akron did a maker fair, one of our small suburbs of Cleveland did a maker fair. You can do a maker fair in every city. Some of them are going to be smaller, some of them are going to be larger, but it's a great way to, just pull in this existing maker community and use it for your library. Use it to connect with this community. It's a great way. Maker fairs are a great way to do this. So next thing we're going to talk about is building sets or toy sets. So when we opened our Tech Central department in 2012, we knew we wanted to do something more hands-on than just have a bunch of computer access. So we started out by purchasing a bunch of these Connect sets, and you may or may not heard of Connects. I know I played with these things 20 years ago growing up, and I had so much fun with these things. And I was going through Amazon finding, okay, how much are Legos? Legos are kind of expensive. How much is this? How much is that? I stumbled upon these Connect sets for $9 a bin. I bought 10 bins of them, put them out, let the patrons just loved them. I had no idea how popular these things were, and people were coming in, oh, you have Kinects? Those are great. We had adults, we had kids, we had young children come in, just had such a blast with these Kinects. So we built upon that. We bought things called snap circuits, which are, I call them electronic Legos. You snap them together and you can create little circuits with resistors and pathways and switches and motors. Then we went out and we splurged for Legos. And Legos are a little bit more expensive. Their name has always basically upcharged the cost of them. They've been, I think they just came out of patent a couple of years ago, but everybody knows what a Lego is. Some of the people were coming in, what's a Kinect? We've never had somebody go, what's a Lego? So it's a great way, and for relatively inexpensive, you can buy a couple kits of these for your library. We found if you just put them out on a table, let people drop in and play with them. We've probably had Legos go missing. We've never had an entire tub go missing, and the pieces never get back in the tubs that they came with. We just accepted that right off the bat, but people have fun, and it gets the gears moving in their heads. The last picture of the Little Bits is great for young kids. So Little Bits are they're little electronic circuits that snap together with magnets, and depending on what order you put them in, they do different things. They have switches and knobs and lights, and whatever you put them in order, and depending on what you press, something will happen on the output. They have a little motor that buzzes, and it's great for really young kids. We haven't found that it's most everybody goes, oh, this is kind of neat, and I put it down, but the young kids just keep snapping the stuff together and have a lot of fun with the Little Bits. So getting these, some of these things like Kinects or Legos or even erector sets or Lincoln Logs, if you have a set laying around in your house, put them out there and just let people's minds get the gears turning. And I apologize, my program has stopped here. There it goes. So one example of building sets, we actually took all of our building sets out to a local festival here in Cleveland called the Ingenuity Fest. It's an art and technology festival. The library had a booth, so we brought all these things out. And this was a picture of what we had at about noon one day. Tons of families, tons of young children having tons of fun. You can see the Legos are everywhere, the Kinects are everywhere. The staff built the big thing, but everybody was really impressed by it. We're actually going to take a stab at letting patrons build this big ball factory here in a couple of weeks. The greatest thing about this, and this is a picture that I'm not sure I didn't take, and I probably couldn't show it even if I did take it. The festival went till about 1 o'clock at night. And about 11:30, 12 o'clock, we had a bunch of adults with their adult beverages in hand sitting around and playing with the Legos and the Kinects and having a blast. They were building huge things. One thing I think was almost half as tall as this big ball factory. They were having so much fun. It doesn't matter if you're young or old. You can connect with Legos and Kinects and building kits and bring out that creative spirit. So music production is another option. Music production is going to get into a little bit more of having to invest in equipment or more expensive things, but not so much that you might think. So for guitars and keyboards, for guitar, the cables, something that's connected into a computer, it maybe cost you $100, $150 for a set. You can, for $500, you can get a nice big set. If you have a Mac or a Windows, you can use an existing PC for that matter. Plug it in and allow people to record musical instruments into the computer and produce songs out of them. The nice thing about it is, put a pair of headphones on there. With a guitar, all you're going to hear is the strumming. With a bass, you might hear a little bit of low strumming. With a keyboard, if somebody's banging on it really loudly, you can hear it. But you're not hearing the traditional amp. All of that happens in the computer, and the computer picks up what sounds like a full guitar. If you have a Mac, GarageBand has a great collection of virtual amps that are free, and plug it in, produce a song. Photo and video is another great way of introducing kind of creative services and programs into your space. This is an example of a green screen. So we introduced a green screen as part of our makerspace. And our green screen is actually kind of a heavy cotton sheet. But I've seen green screens made out of a $6 sheet that you can find at Walmart or a department store. As long as it's kind of a medium shade of a Kelly green, you can put it behind somebody. If you take a picture of somebody in front of a green screen, there's applications out there. Paint.net can do this. It will highlight all of the green behind the person, subtract all the green, and then you can place another image over top of it. So this is the same image with one of my staff members that we put them in front of someplace, I think it's in the Grand Canyon or something like that. And that's our setup. We have a couple studio lights. We have a green screen. I think this whole setup cost us less than $100, and we bought this from an online retailer. For the lights and everything was less than $100. Honestly, if you have decent lighting in your library, a $6 sheet, a $100 point-and-shoot camera, you can have yourself a little green screen video or photo or videography setup right in your library.
CJ, we had a question come in on your previous slide as to what kind of software you use for the computer recording as far as the PC.
Oh, for music and stuff like that?
Yeah.
I use Audacity.
Okay.
That was on one of the previous slides. Audacity is an open source audio recorder and editor. If you're doing basic guitar recording, this is great.
Yeah, I've used it. Yeah, it's really easy and free and easy to use. So. Exactly.
In our makerspace, we have 2 Macs, and we use GarageBand, which is free with the Mac. So Macs are a little bit more expensive, and not all the libraries have them, but it's a great, very high-quality level audio recorder and music production software that comes preloaded on a Mac.
And Nicole says Audacity also works for recording old cassette tapes into your computer.
Yes, I have heard of that, old cassette tapes and LPs.
Wow.
I still listen to my LPs at home. I couldn't imagine. I love the sound of them, but you can actually record them. You connect it into your computer. Just find the right cable to connect either your cassette player or your record player or whatever into your computer, and you use Audacity to record it out, chop the ends off, and export it as an MP3. It's very simple.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, I'll jump ahead here to computer programming. Oops. Okay, so another option you can do is computer programming or even robotics. There's a couple inexpensive options out there. One of them is called Arduino. If you've ever read a tech blog, I'm sure you've heard of Arduino. It's a little bigger than a credit card, a programmable computer board. And the neat thing about Arduino is there are tons of examples and tutorials about how to program on the internet. If you are a library and you purchase one of these kits, they run a kit for everything that you need for an Arduino is probably going to run you between $60 and $100 per kit. So depending on how elaborate you get, it can get kind of expensive with Arduino. But programming is very, very simple, and a lot of it's just copy and paste. You copy and paste. You can tweak little things to allow it to draw things or make motors move, things like that. Arduino can, again, it can get a little expensive if you're buying all these motors and all these add-ons to go with it. But one of the things, this came out about the same time or a little after the Arduino, is called a Raspberry Pi. The computer, or the little board that you see on the right-hand side is no bigger than a credit card. Obviously, it's a little taller than a credit card, but the base is no bigger than a credit card. This is a full computer, and it costs $35. You can plug this into your network. You can plug a USB keyboard and mouse into it. You can plug your TV into it, or an old-fashioned TV or a new HD TV, and run a full computer for $35. Realistically, if you're going to buy the kit, it comes with a little SD card. I think it's right around $50 for the kit and the power adapter and everything you need besides the keyboard, mouse, and monitor. And you can run things like Kids Ruby. The application that I talked about, the Kids Ruby programming application, is designed to run on this Raspberry Pi. So not only can you show people how to program, you can show them what a computer inside looks like. I even know libraries, and this is kind of off topic, that have used these little Raspberry Pis as their public access of their catalog terminals. So really neat, inexpensive way to do computer programming events. Sewing programs. This is something that a lot of libraries go, sewing in a library, and or sewing's not Maker. Well, sewing is Maker. Sewing is kind of the original Maker, I call it. Our library purchased a couple, actually I think 6 sewing machines. I think 4 or 5 basic sewing machines, and then a little bit more advanced that'll do a little bit of embroidery. And we started doing programs about 3 months ago with this. The great thing about it is on our first program, this was in one of our communities the kids will come here after school. The parents usually don't come in, so we did a program for kids after school. The neat thing about it is the majority of the people who came and stayed were young boys. They had so much fun creating. I think in this picture they were creating little machine sewed finger puppets, and they actually put on an entire play with these finger puppets that they sewed themselves. We've done some things since, but it's great because you can pick up sewing machines at thrift stores, or you might have one that you don't use at home you can bring in. Even just having one out there for people to come in and use on a drop-in basis is a great way of introducing some old-fashioned but still very valuable and useful creative type services or programs or tools in your library. So now we're going to jump into what is more of the the expensive side or more costly investment side of making. 3D printing, everybody's heard about 3D printing. It's been on the news. You've probably heard of libraries getting 3D printers. You can get a 3D printer. Well, to back up, how a 3D printer works is it takes a computer-generated 3D model. So a 3D model is on a computer, and then we'll take it and use a spool stick. It melts that spool of plastic and prints out layer by layer what that 3D object was on your screen. So you can see some examples in front of our 3D printer. The thing about these 3D printers is that these 3D printers cost tens, 20, or sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's 3D printers out there that are as cheap as $500 now. The 3D printer you see in the picture, I think, ran us about $1,100. We have a second 3D printer just because of the demand of printing is on there that ran us about $2,300. They have some really small 3D printers for about $500. The biggest cost of the 3D printer is the hardware itself. Once you get past that, the materials are super cheap. Nothing that you see in front of you, it costs more than about, I think the most expensive thing is the red cup, and it was about $2 to print. All the little chess pieces were 10, 20, 30 cents a piece. The bracelets cost 2 or 3 cents a piece. Super cheap to actually print stuff out. It's just an initial investment for hardware. So some of the things that you can use with a 3D printer. We have done a custom 3D cookie cutter lab where patrons can come in and use this program called Cookie Caster. It allows you to draw an outline on the screen, and then it will generate a 3D cookie cutter that you can print on a 3D printer. Tinkercad is one of those 123D apps that I mentioned earlier. This is a freely available online CAD program that you can draw shapes in, you can draw text in, and then you can get a file that outputs from that's compatible with 3D printers. Thingiverse.com, I call it the Wikipedia of stuff. This is a website that has a bunch of pre-made 3D models that you can download and print on a 3D printer. Down near the bottom is the Solidoodle 3D printer. This is a really tiny desktop 3D printer. I think the biggest thing it can print is maybe a 4-inch cube size or maybe a 5-inch cube size. And this is that $500 printer I was telling you about. This is a great way if you want to get into 3D printing, if you want to use it for maybe a traveling exhibit or allow patrons to come in and kind of tinker with it. This is a great inexpensive way of delving into 3D printing that's not going to break the bank in most cases. The one thing with 3D printing is that this level of 3D printing, these are the consumer or hobbyist grade 3D printers. They don't come with support. You're not going to call somebody when it breaks. Somebody's not going to come out to your library and fix it. It's going to be you, or it's going to be one of your patrons. When we bought our first 3D printer, I had never seen a 3D printer. None of my staff had seen a 3D printer. And we have learned from the ground up how to dismantle this and reassemble it from scratch. It has broken on us. We've had times where it's been down for 2-3 days. One time was even close to 2 weeks, and we had to figure out what was wrong with it and reassemble it. We had some communication with the manufacturer via email, but none of them had a phone number, and we really had to learn on our own. We have actually 3 3D printers in our library now, 3 different types of 3D printers in our library. One of them is called a MakerGear M2, and makergear.com is the website. They're actually a local company right here in Cleveland. They're in one of our suburbs. We went with them because they were local. We really try to do as much local as we can, and they had a really solid 3D printer. A couple features that we learned that it didn't have, like being able to pause a 3D print overnight. We can only print while we're open, so we wanted to be able to pause it because some of our prints took 6, 8, 10 hours in some cases. So one of the biggest 3D printer manufacturers out there for hobbyist or consumer level is a company called MakerBot, and they are out of Brooklyn, New York, and they're pretty much the Cadillac of this level printer. They just released 3 new printers ranging from $1,000 to, I don't remember what they're most expensive, but most of their printers range from $1,000 to about $3,000 depending on the level. One of them is a little larger than the Solid Doodle, and they're really rock-solid printers that are great for showing off or letting patrons get hands-on. Their newest, their smallest one, I think, coming out this spring, even is completely enclosed. So if you want to have it out, they made it specifically so fingers aren't going to get in there and burn themselves on the little heated tip that extrudes or squirts out the plastic filament. Another option is doing paper and vinyl craft machinery. You probably heard of the Cricut cutters. These are paper craft cutters. You can also do vinyl stencils on them. They have the silhouette vinyl cutters that you see down there. These are specifically designed for vinyl and creating vinyl signage and vinyl signage and stencils and wall art. Then they have larger things like this. This is a roll-in vinyl cutter that we have in our makerspace. So the roll-in vinyl cutter runs about $1,600, $1,700. The Cricut cutters are less than $100 in some cases, and the silhouette vinyl cutters are between $100 and $300. So depending on where you are at with library budgets and what you want to do, you can range from kind of base level Cricut cutters all the way up to very professional level roll-in vinyl cutters. The roll-in vinyl cutters are the same vinyl cutters that are used in sign shops throughout the nation. So, and even though they're running about $1,600, I believe. So this is a link for the two of those, or the silhouette vinyl cutters and the Cricut cutters. So one of the other big things that happen in makerspaces, and a lot of this is usually found in non-library makerspaces, but there are a couple library makerspaces that do fabrication. 3D printing is considered a form of fabrication, but usually when we're talking fabrication, we're talking vinyl cutters and laser engravers and saws or CNC machines. Our library in our makerspace that just opened does have a vinyl cutter. So vinyl cutters can be used to do a couple different things. It can be used to engrave things like this little Tech Central oval coaster that we made. We engraved it, and you can also cut out certain materials like wood and acrylic. A great example is this little design that's on the bottom there. Your fabrication equipment is where you're going to get into the more expensive realm. So laser engravers range anywhere from about $3,000 to $100,000, depending on how large, how powerful, what materials it can cut through. This is definitely your higher end of things. As you get into the fabrication, some fabrication is relatively inexpensive. You can have a little saw, a balsa wood saw, and do balsa wood construction. I believe the Westport Public Library has done some balsa wood stuff. And it can be inexpensive depending on your materials and your tools, but it can also get very expensive. Our makerspace, again, does have a vinyl cutter, or a laser cutter and engraver, a 3D printer, a 3D scanner. And so it really depends on what your community wants. We knew that our community, not only did they want program, but they wanted a place to come in and use some of this equipment. because they couldn't afford to purchase this equipment, or that they may not have been able to afford to invest $100 or a couple $100 monthly on a for-profit makerspace. So this is a great opportunity for us to be able to provide a space for everybody to come in and everybody to have access within the library for fabrication, music production, and design, and things like that. So there was a question about a little bit about our makerspace. Again, our makerspace opened on Saturday, and I was talking earlier about a makerspace doesn't necessarily have to be as expensive as you may think it is. So to recap what we have, a lot of what we have is a lot of what I talked about. We have a laser engraver, a vinyl cutter, a 3D printer, a 3D scanner, all of which are very professional quality. Our 3D printer is one of the consumer grade quality things. We have a green screen. We have a very professional photo and HD video camera. We have musical instruments. We have 2 Macs, 4 PCs loaded with Adobe Creative Suite, which is industry standard software package, Corel Draw. And for all in total, and granted this may sound as a shock to some libraries, we spent less than $50,000 for everything. We tried to get free and inexpensive software where we could. We tried to get volume licensing discounts and even grants through one great site is for software. I apologize, it's just slipping my mind. I will think about it here in a second, but we tried to get software donations or software grants. We use a lot of free open source software. Our green screen kit cost us $100. It looks like it cost us a couple $1,000s for it with the photo lights, and it cost us $100 to get everything. So we tried to save where we could and invest in things like a laser engraver, which was probably the most expensive thing in our space. And in the grand scheme of what it cost to originally build this department, this was just a drop in the bucket for our size library. It's going to vary whether you're a big library or you're a small library. And not only do we have our makerspace, we created 20 different brand new maker labs, hands-on programming classes. We have our maker kits, which are our Connects and Legos. We have this whole slew of maker services that spill outside of just our makerspace, which is in our downtown library. And we provide this service to the entire city of Cleveland in 28 branches as well. So we do so on a relatively small budget. In a lot of cases, because we don't have a budget for programming. All of our maker labs are completely free. We use materials and supplies and tools that we already have laying around within our department. So this is this is a bunch of examples of ways that you can incorporate maker services and tools and spaces within your own library, ranging from not investing anything except for staff time to investing for large pieces of equipment and creating a dedicated makerspace. So I appreciate everybody's time today. Thanks for having me out. I am willing to take any kind of questions that you have, and my contact information is listed on the slide up right now.
Thank you, CJ. As he said, we do have a few minutes if you have any questions for him while he is here. We did have a few throughout that I've passed along and that he answered. And I have to say, CJ, I'm really glad that you mentioned doing things on a smaller scale, but because for some libraries, $50,000 might be their annual budget. And
I know, and I've worked with a library that $50,000 was the entire capital budget. I've worked with libraries that $50,000 was their staffing budget. So getting things that are inexpensive, and coming from that background, a lot of the stuff that I do, I have no programming budget, but yet we can do 20 programs, and we've offered close to 40 maker labs in the past year out of no programming budget. So even in a big library, there's ways to do some of this maker stuff with absolutely no money and just a staff member.
So why did you think it was important to make that shift from no programming to what you're doing now, or how did that all come about? Did that take some time or buy-in from some staff, or how did that all happen?
Well, one of the big things that we knew as we started this whole maker culture in our library is that most of our patrons had no idea how to make. And the patrons that came through our door didn't know what maker was. honestly, they didn't really know how to be creative. So we started slowly. We started with the programs that we knew we can draw a couple people in and kind of build upon there. We can teach them how to do something simple and then let them grow. And when we decided to do this, we had no budget. We were a brand new department. They had budgeted for creating our space, for renovating our space, but we had no programming budget.
And what year was this, or how long ago was this?
This was actually 2013. We opened in 2012, and 2013 was when we started doing our first maker programming.
Okay.
And so we built upon that, and our end goal was to be able to have a dedicated makerspace. We knew we wanted to do this. We didn't know we were going up for a levy, so honestly we didn't know if we were going to have the money to do this. And so we started making plans kind of as frugally as possible, and which is why the end result for the space was actually a lot less than what we had thought or even feared that it might be. And we really just tried to do small. So right now, most of the money for the makerspace was invested in equipment, and what we're planning on doing right now is continuing the programming surrounding that equipment, and we are really on a shoestring budget, even in a metropolitan library.
Aaron asks, are your Lego programs directed, or are they just free play? And I guess are a lot of your programs free play, or do they all work the same way?
Almost all of them are directed. All of our maker programs are directed. How they usually work out is for an hour-long program, about 20 to 30 minutes of it is the staff member showing you how to do something. In a lot of cases, we'll have a computer in front of you or a laptop in front of you. In some cases where we're not using a computer, we'll have the materials in front of you that you can kind of try to follow along. Then the rest of it is having that staff member walk around and actually help you. You can ask them questions. They can say, oh, here, why don't you try this? This might be easier. Or you can say, hey, I found out this is an easier way of doing this, and we'll communicate it to the group. So about half of it is directed and half of it is letting them go. The Lego programs, we found that the best way of doing it is just to put everything out and let people come in. We'll advertise that, hey, our Legos are going to be out from this time to this time on this day, and they flock in.
Very interesting. I'm kind of throwing this question out to everyone, and some people might say you already have your dream space, but so maybe based on what you're hoping to do, but what does your dream space look like, your tech central or your maker space, if money weren't an issue? What would you like to see?
Our maker space right now is a 16-foot by 20-foot corner of our department, and we crammed all of this equipment into this. I would love to see a space that's probably 3 times as big, that has more seating space, that has places for people to come in and really do creativity and planning, business development, a true maker space in, I think, what I would consider the traditional, having a place for people to, like a business incubator would be my dream. But that really reflects the community that we are in. We have a lot of entrepreneurs. We have a lot of people with great ideas. A lot of those people live in homeless shelters in the city, and we would love to provide them the space and the tools to take those ideas and do something with them, and really, in some cases, change their life. So that would be my dream space. But honestly, I think right now I have what the space that I did envision, and I'm waiting to see how the community reacts to it. The space was planned from a lot of feedback that we got within the community, but I want to see what they do with it, and I want to see where it goes with it before I imagine the next step of this space.
And that's very exciting. And you even mentioned to me that even if you don't have a space, say some of our smaller libraries out there, they might not have a dedicated space for a maker room, but I think you even mentioned just if you have a table in your community room or your meeting room where people can just meet, that can suffice too.
Yeah. And actually, at 2 of our branches are very small. For a metropolitan library, we have very community-oriented libraries, and all of our branches are very small. They have a small collection, maybe 3 or 4 staff members at the most in some of these, and most of them have a meeting room. And some of the meeting rooms are pretty small. But the programs that we're doing out in our branches are in the meeting rooms. We're using this multi-purpose space. Some of the programs that either the meeting room is being used by community groups, we're out in the middle of their reference section or their kids section or their computer section doing these programs because there is no space in some of these branches.
Awesome. Well, thank you, CJ, for sharing what you're doing. And we're going to have to touch base with you maybe a few months, 6 months down the road and see how your space is going and how you've
Absolutely.
expanded. So thank you for the information. Thank you all for joining in, for your questions and your participation. We have one more program left at 4 o'clock. We're going to stay in Ohio with Laura Solomon. She's going to talk about creating a social media policy. She's a great presenter. We'll continue the great on with the great presentations that we've had today and yesterday. So again, thank you, CJ. Thank you all. We will hopefully talk to most of you later. If not, so long.